Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are and wherever you are watching. Today we're going to take a look at yesterday's events of the 60-day memorandum of understanding between the US and Iran expiring and what its implications might be. Chances are this is probably going to be a long one because, like most things with America, it is not simply black and white, and the more you look into it, the more murky and difficult it gets. So grab a coffee, relax, and we shall begin. So this began, a memorandum of understanding was signed on June the 17th, 2026 in Islamabad between Iran and the US. It was basically a 60-day ceasefire that would enable talks, which would then lead to peace talks with a view to ending the war. So yeah, that expired yesterday. No official talks have been announced, and neither side wanted to extend the agreement. Basically, the memorandum of understanding was basically dead in the water, because before the ink had even had chance to dry, both sides were exchanging strikes with each other. So what happens now that the deadline has passed? So there's now no extension for truce. Trump and Abbas Araghchi, the Iranian foreign minister, have indicated that they will not seek an extension of the ceasefire. Abbas Araghchi, sorry for my pronunciation, claimed the MOU represented an end to the war rather than a temporary ceasefire. The Strait of Hormuz deadlock, that's not going anywhere. It remains a primary point of contention for both parties. The US has continued and probably will continue its blockade of Iranian ports for the foreseeable future, while Iran has effectively closed the strait to traffic. Before the conflict, just some rough numbers, you were looking at on average around 130 ships per day passing through the strait. While Iran has been having its chokehold over the strait, you're lucky if you get single-digit amounts of ships passing through. And I think it was just this weekend past, or maybe the one before, on the Sunday, 0 vessels passed through, which is, given 20% of the world's energy passes through the strait, is a choke point and bottleneck for the United States, and is fast turning into a pain in the ass. Also, what's going to happen now that the memorandum of understanding has expired? The return to economic pressure. So rather than immediate military escalation, the US strategy currently appears focused on economic leverage. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent warned that the US would implement unprecedented economic isolation measures against Iran. The nuclear issue of Iran remains unresolved. The memorandum of understanding, one of the main points, was intended to kickstart a comprehensive agreement on Iran's nuclear program. Trump's recently reiterated, amongst many other times, that preventing Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon remains his primary goal, while even his own officials assert that Iran is showing no interest in abandoning its nuclear ambitions. The main thing that's probably going to happen is the conflict and confrontation is going to be prolonged. Experts are predicting and suggesting that a prolonged period of on-off confrontation is the most likely outcome, while neither side may actively seek a major regional war. The lack of a diplomatic framework increases a miscalculation. It risks massive miscalculation, which could then spiral out of control at lightning speed. Qatar and Pakistan are reportedly continuing to act as intermediaries. All the while, Iran and Oman are going a separate way, trying to work out a deal for the Strait of Hormuz. With Trump going so far as yesterday, as it was reported, that he threatened to bomb the shit out of Oman if they got in the way. So now he's taken to threatening to bomb US allies. Go Trump. So what is Iran's stance now that the memo of understanding has expired? Foreign Ministry spokesman Esmail Bakweri, sorry for my pronunciations in Arabic, stated that because the US violated the understanding from the beginning, the 60-day deadline is no longer relevant. Direct negotiations hadn't even begun. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi argued that the memo of understanding was intended to mark the end of the war, not serve as a temporary ceasefire. He's noted that while messages are still being exchanged through intermediaries like Qatar and Pakistan, these back-channel communications do not constitute active negotiations. So basically, they're like two children passing notes backwards and forwards in the classroom to each other while the teacher is talking. Araghchi insists Iran will not return to the table as long as the US continues its current actions. This is going to last a while. President Masoud Pezeshkian and other senior officials have framed the initial signing of the MOU as a diplomatic victory achieved from a position of strength, maintaining that Iran did not surrender to outside pressure. So the reason why this conflict is going to be ongoing, probably for the foreseeable future, and completely smashing to bits Trump's claim on election that he will get involved in no more forever wars, is this. Iran has gone much firmer in regarding the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz and future peace terms. According to an August the 8th proposal, Tehran's demands now include the lifting of the US naval blockade and all economic sanctions, the withdrawal of the US military from the region surrounding Iran, the payment of war reparations and the release of frozen Iranian assets, and an end to US attacks on Iran's regional allies. It's probably certainly not going to happen, because if Trump gives in to one or more of them 4 points that I've just listed, Iran would seize that as victory, and it would basically smash Trump's chances in the midterms. Trump, being the stubborn, belligerent president that he is not going to do anything that would perceive giving Iran a victory. So, and Iran isn't going to give up, so we're now at the point of immovable object and unstoppable force. So Iran are also exploring alternative avenues and military posturing. Instead of negotiate with the US over the Strait of Hormuz, Iran has shifted its diplomatic focus regionally. Araghchi confirmed that Iran has conducted separate technical negotiations with Oman, like I just mentioned, to design a temporary shipping route through the strait, which they hope to make permanent. Like I also said, Trump also came out and threatened to bomb the shit out of Oman, if they get in the way to de-escalate. Simultaneously, Tehran continues to project a strong military deterrent. Iranian Army Chief Amir Hatami issued a stern warning against further US military action, claiming that US forces have effectively been expelled from the region and will not be allowed back into the Persian Gulf, the Sea of Oman, or the Strait of Hormuz. What adds another murky depth to this story is a post on Truth Social by Donald Trump and his comments at a New York rally. I'll just read you his Truth Social post. The USA has total control over the Strait of Hormuz. I think we will keep it. Our naval blockade is being called by everyone a wall of steel, and there's nothing Iran can do about it. They have no navy, they have no air force, their remaining soldiers are unpaid, the IRGC is decimated and fleeing, and their leadership is uncertain at best. They have no money, their country is shot, all they have is fake news and 300% inflation and getting worse. Iran is all talk and no action. The bully of the Middle East is no longer. Praise be to Allah. President Donald J. Trump. So, also at a New York rally, Trump declared that he intends that the Strait of Hormuz becomes a US territory once a conflict with Iran concludes. Could he actually do it? Under international law, no. Doing so would violate several established global maritime frameworks, the International Strait Classification being one. The Strait of Hormuz is a vital waterway connecting the Persian Gulf to the open ocean. Customary in international law and United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. The Strait of Hormuz is classified as an international strait. That status guarantees the right of transit passage, or innocent passage as it's also known, for all vessels, meaning no single country can claim ownership or block the passage of neutral ships. The geographic sovereignty, the strait lies between Iran and Oman. The territorial waters within the strait belong to those two sovereign nations and not the United States. What would the implications be? First off is a direct military escalation. Iran already considers the US's naval presence and blockade as a major provocation in attempting to annex the strait or impose the US tolls, as Trump has also mentioned that he would do, would more than likely or even certainly lead to a direct military confrontation with Iran. Iran's coastline's heavily armed, and yeah, that is probably a certainty that if America did try to make the Strait of Hormuz its a territory of the US, that the conflict would kick off immediately. The global economic shock, if the US did somehow manage to make it a US territory, the US would basically hold a monopoly on 20% of the world's energy. Given the direct military escalation would certainly take place, the global economic shock would be horrific. Energy prices would skyrocket even further, severely impacting the global market and causing energy shortages, particularly in Asia. Trump would also alienate most of his allies in the international community. It would draw widespread condemnation, and allies who rely on the strait for energy, as well as adversaries, would view it as a massive overreach and violation of rules. Another thing that Trump's probably not thinking about is him trying to do this would embolden other nations to make similar territorial claims over critical choke points. Think China and Taiwan. If that kicks off, then we're in a whole other world of shit. So picking apart Trump's Truth Social post saying that they've got total control over the Strait of Hormuz, let's have a look at some numbers quickly. Before the conflict, prior to February when it kicked off with Iran, the average number of ships transiting every day through the strait was between 130 to 140 on average. Some days probably more, some days less. It depended, but that was your average. Like is already known, these amount of ships transiting every day carry 20% of the world's energy exports. Currently, August 26, in mid-July, average crossings had fallen to around 10 per day, less than 10% prior to February 26. By mid-August, traffic slowed to a near complete halt. Ship tracking data showed that only 8 ships passed through on August the 11th, and I think it was the weekend gone, or perhaps the one before. On the Saturday, only 5 crossed and 0 on Sunday. Another data on Friday, August the 14th. So yeah, that was just last Friday. Just 2 vessels made the crossing. All this due to the blockade on Iranian ports and Iran saying, well, screw you, we'll close the Strait of Hormuz. So that is that. But what makes this even murkier is Israel. Israel has set up a military operation and has their forces on absolute readiness. That operation is called Blue and White. So that was ordered by Israel CAT in mid-2026. So what Operation White and Blue is it's an independent strike plan that allows Israel to strike Iran unilaterally without US authority or support. 2 of the red lines for Operation Blue and White was the breakdown of talks between Iran and the US. Another one was a direct strike on Israel by Iran. So, with the memo of understanding effectively dead in the water, the first red line is effectively met. Israel is now legally and operationally positioned to launch Operation Blue and White at any moment if they detect Iran launches a strike towards Israel. So, what is Operation Blue and White? So they've got pre-positioned targets that is already targeted and they're ready to go at a moment's notice. So if Iran or its proxies crosses the red line by launching a direct missile strike against Israeli territory, the operation can transition straight into execution, and Israel have repeatedly said they're ready to launch the operation tomorrow if that red line is crossed. If Operation Blue and White was ordered to go ahead, this makes the US headache a lot worse because Iran will immediately retaliate against US assets. They don't always distinguish between American and Israeli positions, and we've seen earlier on in the conflict that Iran will strike US bases in the wider Middle East. So what would happen to the wider region? The wider region would almost be at a certain risk of going into full-on open regional warfare. It wouldn't remain a localised exchange. Operation Blue and White starts the northern front, which is Lebanon and Syria, would give the immediate green light for the remaining militant proxies, notably Hezbollah in Lebanon and allied militias in Syria, forcing Israel to fight a multi-front war simultaneously. Iran's military doctrine relies heavily on asymmetric retaliation. In past standoffs and regional crisis, as we've seen this year, Tehran and its proxy networks have targeted critical energy infrastructure, shipping lanes, and the desalination plants in the Persian Gulf, neighbouring Gulf states, and critical trade routes through the Strait of Hormuz would be immediately destabilised. So yeah, Iran have threatened to go after desalination plants in neighbouring countries in the Middle East. Doing so would immediately place them countries back to the Stone Ages, as the desalination plants are essential for their basic survival. Also, with Operation Blue and White, if it was launched, given the Middle East is already on a knife edge and is deeply, deeply strained, any new direct exchange would be like throwing a match into a tinderbox. It's just going to go up. So what would be the best outcome for Trump? Basically, Trump needs a win, but Iran isn't going to give him that win without a fight, and anything less than what he sees as total victory would be a complete embarrassment for his presidency and his aims in the Gulf. Basically, we're at a stalemate. It's a movable object and unstoppable force. Trump's rhetoric of turning the Strait of Hormuz into a US territory is probably about as worse as rhetoric can get, as it's just going to fire up Iran even more. Why would Trump want to turn the Strait of Hormuz into a US territory? Well, it's simple. He hasn't said it, but if a US territory comes under attack, the US have the right to invade it. Putting boots on the ground right now would be a deeply unpopular move. Making the Strait of Hormuz into a US territory would allow him to put boots on the ground and basically say, it's our territory, it's been attacked, so we're going to defend it. And that's basically where we're at. It's well known that you cannot win wars simply with missile strikes and air strikes, that at some point or other, boots are going to have to go on the ground to finish off the job. And that is literally where we're at. Trump is fast running out of road. He's fast running out of options. And at some point or other, the way it's going, he's going to be backed into a corner that he can't escape from. And his only option is going to be troops on the ground. Given he was very loud and very vocal on the campaign trail that he would be getting involved in no more forever wars in the Middle East, getting boots on the ground would pretty much smash to pieces his campaign trail promises. And basically, he would be a duff president, because, like I say, he promised no more forever wars in the Middle East. And given the timelines that he projected for Iran would be 4 to 6 weeks, and we're now at 6 months, it's already a deeply unpopular war. So he's going to have to look at an off-ramp, and given the midterms are in November, it's now August, near the end of August, that date for the midterms is fast approaching. He's desperately looking for an off-ramp, and now the memorandum of understanding is expired. He's basically back to square one. Iran have gave their conditions, which the US won't. They won't give into. The US have gave their conditions, Iran won't give into. So it's a movable object and unstoppable force. But can the US actually carry on a war of attrition long term? When you're looking at the munitions and the reports about the US munitions and how significantly depleted they are, no. Because America relies on high-tech munitions, for example, the Patriot, the THAAD interceptors, you're not looking at days, weeks, or months to manufacture these weapons. You're looking at years, and as of right now, analysts are estimating it could take until mid to late 2029 to return the defensive stockpiles to the pre-war levels. Some rough numbers. Before the war, the US had an estimated 2,330 Patriot interceptors. By the end of July, the number had plummeted between 759 to 827. They're burning through it at a rate of knots. THAAD interceptors. Stockpile dropped from an estimated 452 down to between 234 and 278. Some reports are suggesting that up to 80% of the inventory may be depleted. And again, it takes years. You're looking at 1 to 5 years to manufacture these weapons. Tomahawk missiles. The US fired more than 1,000 missiles during the campaign. Production rates have historically been low, fewer than 200 per year. Estimates suggest it could take up until late 2030 to fully replenish a specific stockpile. 4 years to replace weapons. MQ-9 Reaper drones, the US has lost at least 45 of them, representing roughly 25% of its entire fleet. Some were shot down, others crashed due to communication failures. Just the loss of 45 drones has represented a 1.3 billion financial hit. The Pentagon is seeking an additional 21 billion from Congress just to replenish the weapons expended during the Iran campaign. But it goes deeper than that. If there were another conflict to kick off, where the US would have to get involved, what are they going to do? They've got fewer spare weapons to support even the Ukraine and Israel. And if China decided to make a move on Taiwan, the weapons are severely depleted. So it may come to a point where the US has to choose what battle to fight and who to leave to wallow and end up getting taken over by an enemy. When you look at Iranian munitions, the United States assesses with certainty that combined coalition forces have outrightly destroyed roughly 1/3 of Iran's total missile stockpile. Another third of a stockpile has likely been damaged, destroyed, or buried. But Iran is ramping up production and rapidly rebuilding. Israeli Defense and Mossad officials recently described the speed of Iran's recovery as a stunningly speedy turnaround, forcing them to revise earlier assessments that the strike had set Tehran's capability back by years. The memorandum of understanding, that 60 days, Iran used it to ramp up production of their munitions. The ballistic missiles, Iran has reportedly used bulldozers to quickly clear the rubble and reopen access to the deeply buried underground missile factories. Iran relies heavily on drones like the Shahed, which, they cost between $20,000 and $50,000 a unit. They're simple to manufacture, can be manufactured in vast quantities, and rather than having one central factory, there's factories dispersed over the country, so that even if one of these dispersed factories get taken out, it doesn't stop the entire production line, unlike US Patriot systems where components are manufactured in just one factory. The IDF was saying in the strikes that did before the US joined them that the belief had crippled them for years. And Iran have come back and are building more and more quickly. So yeah, it's there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of hot air coming from both sides, notably Trump. You know, what the biggest hot air is Trump saying America has control of the Strait of Hormuz. Is that actual fact? Probably not, given that, like I said earlier, that the pre-war traffic was average 130 ships a day. Given the weekend just gone, or the weekend before, on one day 0 vessels passed through, I'd say that's highly unlikely. The naval blockade on Iran, yes, a blockade in Iran, but Iran has effectively closed off a transit passage that carries 20% of the world's energy exports, which has absolutely skyrocketed the gas prices in America and sent shockwaves around the world. So both sides are disputing who controls who, but you know, America's saying that it's in total control. Take it with a pinch of salt, and especially given that American forces have been escorting ships through the Strait of Hormuz and there's been successful attacks on these ships, further disputes Trump's claim that they have total control over the Strait of Hormuz. So, yes, looking at this, it's very murky. You know, there's a lot of play, and basically now the Middle East is on a knife edge. You know, now the memorandum of understanding is expired. There's no constraints, there's no guardrails, there's no nothing. One false move by either party, and the conflict is risking not only escalating but dragging the whole region into full-blown warfare. What would I do if I was in the Middle East right now? By whatever means necessary, I'd get the hell out of Dodge. Like I say, one false move by either party, and you're looking at rapid escalation with a possibility that there's no coming back from. Both sides aren't looking to extend the truce. Both sides have basically said not happening. Both sides are laying demands on the other, which aren't going to be met. And then you have Israel in the background that's basically ready to unleash holy hell on Iran, which will then come back to bite them on the backside, because Iran and Iran's proxies will respond. And yeah, there looks to be no end in sight, and Donald Trump's midterms look to be quite sticky for him, to say the least. So yeah, not looking good, and basically no end in sight to the war in the Middle East. So that's it for today. No doubt there'll be more looks at this as the situation unfolds, which again, it can happen within minutes, within hours, and no doubt by the end of the day there'd probably be something more to add to this video if I did it tomorrow. So yeah, more looks at it in the future when events unfold, and see where we go. Thank you and goodbye.